Previously on the Outside of Sunday podcast.
And they said it's the worst cancer in the worst place and it's terminal and she may have as little as 4 weeks. In fact, she told me off for crying about it. So
what a
yeah,
amazing
it's just
girl.
so amazing because every now and again she'd catch me having a wee cry about it, or a couple of times she had to go on the ambulance and I'd cry about that. Yeah. And she's like, "Don't cry about it, Mum. You look so weird when you cry. I'm just going to Jesus."
Hey, you're listening to the Outside of Sunday podcast. Is your faith stuck on Sunday? Christianity was never meant to be constrained to a weekly church service. I'm Krista, and here you'll find discussions on the Bible, mum life, and of course, how to live your faith outside of Sunday.
And I was just peacefully holding her. I was like, she's gone. And then she'd come back, and then she was gone. And then the next morning she woke up. And
wow.
Yeah, and then, but during that time when I was holding her and her heart stopped, my eyes were shut, but in the distance, I could see a really heavenly place, and I was like, oh, that's really beautiful. And I could see Tara walking some stairs and going to this light and things, and I was like, oh, that's really beautiful. But I was like, that's my imagination, and I was okay with that. I was like, that's beautiful. Tara's going to heaven, I know that. And I didn't really think that much of it. And then when Tara woke up, and then that night, and I was saying prayers with her, I was like, thank you, God, that Tara's here. I really thought you'd gone to heaven, Tara, but I'm really glad you're here. And she goes, I did twice.
Wow.
And I hadn't told her heart had stopped twice.
Wow.
And I hadn't told her that she'd stopped breathing. And then I said, wow, what was it like? And she goes, oh, it was so comfy. All the holy people were there. And
so
and I can so comfy, and I could do everything that I can't do now. And she said, but they weren't ready for me yet. And she went into it in quite some detail, but what she described was what I'd seen, exactly what I'd seen.
Wow.
And that was it just gave me so much peace. I was like, I know heaven's real, and I know God's real. And I know that that's where Tara is. But that was just such a gift. I was like, yeah, 100%. And then when it came to the time when Tara was dying, I was peaceful. And I think when we're truly open to God's grace and our hearts are open, there are real amazing moments like that when, God's like, I've got you. Yes, this is hard. This suffering is hard.
Yeah.
But I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He is.
Sorry.
That's right. Let's take a moment.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. Right. And don't worry, cry as much as you want. It's not a problem for us.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I thought maybe we could just start talking about what Tara's health was looking like towards the end.
Yeah.
So you mentioned she couldn't walk, or she was having trouble walking at some point.
Yeah. So she went paralysed down one side, and like face and all the way down her left side. And that was for quite a few weeks. And that was months before she died. But then one day she came to me and she said, Mum, it stopped growing. And I was like, really? Really? She goes, yeah, it stopped growing. And we had wanted to take her on a trip to Australia with her sisters. But I could not face one more bad news situation. So I didn't want to have another scan. I just was like, I can't face it. But Eden was like, we've got to do this. If she thinks it stopped growing, maybe it has.
Yeah.
And amazingly it had.
Amazing.
And this was a tumour that was growing 0.5 millimetre a day. It was growing really fast.
Wow.
Yeah. And it had just stopped. And the doctors were like, we don't know why it stopped. And we're like, right, let's go to Australia with the kids. So we took them the next week.
Great.
Yeah. And because she had been paralysed and then she wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the doctors were like, we cannot explain this because her tumour wasn't just a growing tumour, it was also a necrotizing tumour, so it's eating the brain around it. So it's not just pushing brain aside, it's consuming the brain as well. So she had lost the ability to walk and use her left side. The part of the brain was gone. but then she could do it again.
Wow. How is that possible?
Yeah. And so she couldn't just walk. She did the water slides at Wet n Wild in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, like she could do everything. And so we had this amazing family holiday, and that was in the September, I think. But then over the summer, and she went back to school. Like the doctors had said she's going to die within the month. And we were like, well, we're not going to put a time limit on God here. We'll just see. In fact, one of the doctors said, let's do Christmas early because she's not going to make it. And we're like, we're not going to send that message.
Yeah.
And then she regained her speech, and she regained,
Wow.
yeah, pretty much everything. And then and we had a lovely last term at school, and yeah, it was phenomenal. And then about 6 weeks before she actually died, she got really sick, and yeah, she couldn't walk, and slowly she lost her ability to speak. So I taught her just some really simple sign language. So she reckoned that
that's a great idea, Jenny.
Yeah. So because she had use of her right hand, she reckoned that all you actually needed was thank you, food, drink, and I love you, and you could get through everything. She's like, that's all you need. So we got by on those signs, and every now and again, like she'd be able to control her speech a little bit, but she couldn't really converse so much. And her voice got really soft, and it was kind of like a regression back to babyhood, but she never lost her ability to, like, she had full cognition right up until she died. Because that was something that I was really fearful of, that she would lose her personality, but she never did.
Wow.
Yeah.
So she was at home at this point.
Yeah.
Did she have hospice care at some point?
Yeah, she had hospice care. She had hospice care months before she died, and then they stopped coming because she came right so well.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, then they came back, and she was having daily medication, and she had a pump with morphine, and then she had fentanyl patches, and they cared for her really well. But actually, my husband was amazing in his ability to learn about all the medications, because Tara had really, really terrible nausea, so she would vomit a lot, but then she couldn't keep down nausea meds, and it's such a fine balance when you're dealing with such major medication. But my husband knew everything about all these different medications and how they contradict, and what this one does and what that one does, to the point where he bypassed our doctor here and just went straight to Starship and said, this is what we need, get it sent. And he was
Go
amazing.
Eden.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So amazing. And so yeah, we managed all her medication and care at home. And then 3 days before she died, she went unconscious on the Wednesday morning. So I called Eden home from work, because I was like, she's not right. That she had just taken a big dive.
Okay.
And I was like, she's not right. So Eden came home from work, because of course she still had to work when she was sick. And she went unconscious, and she was unconscious from that Wednesday until she died in the early hours of Friday morning.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just our little family around. And we called them the A-team, which was our number one supporters. Which, with my mum and my dad, and my sister had come back from Auckland, and Eden's sister had come up from Greymouth. And they were just around all the time, helping and supporting. But Tara died in bed with Eden and myself, and yeah, it was just peaceful, but just the three of us, and it felt full circle from when she was born.
Wow.
And yeah, the only prayer that I could pray when I was holding her was, thy will be done. It was it.
Yeah.
It was it. At those really hard times, there's actually no words.
Yeah.
Other than, thy will be done, because I knew that God had her, and I didn't know what else there was to pray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And even to be able to pray that, I think, is huge, because we can fight,
Yeah.
fight against God's will. But, in the end of the day, God is God, eh? God is God. It doesn't mean that it's easy at all. I mean, I can't imagine going through that. And you've done it so beautifully. And I think that's just such a beautiful testament to your personal faith in God and in Christ. And yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it was, I just threw out the time when she was unconscious and when she was dying. As a mother, just makes you think so much about giving birth. Like, there's such a parallel between it.
Yeah.
Because when we're giving birth, we relinquish so much control to God.
Yeah.
And yeah.
We don't know when our baby's going to come.
No.
Or what condition they're going to be in, or, are they going to need intervention or what? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. And yeah, I thought about that a lot when she was dying. But I drew so much courage from Tara's own example, because her whole walk was, they will be done, I'm fine. That was it. She just carried on living and not worrying. And so, yeah, I tried to be brave like her and not look weird when I cry. Yeah.
I'm just reflecting a little bit of when my dad passed away, because he passed away when he was...
I knew your dad.
Yeah, you knew my dad. He's a wonderful man.
Yeah.
But I remember when he first got sick, we were praying basically let's get him healed, God do a miracle, God do a miracle. And we did get a miracle of sorts in that we got this awesome... Suddenly, they found out that he actually had a super specific variant of cancer, and that he could take this super... it was almost like a trial drug. And once he started taking that, he bounced back, and it was great. And we had him for 18 months. And then he passed away. Like you say, we can't control everything. We can have faith and believe and cry out to God. But at the end of the day, we are not Jesus. We are not God. And I also have that assurance that I'm going to see my dad again. Yeah. And I think I've talked about this in a previous episode, but when he passed away, it was almost like a feeling of he's just going before me. He's just going away, and I'm going to see him again. And it's sad because he's on a distant shore, He is so far away, and I'm not with him, but I know that I will be. And I almost feel more brave because I know my dad's done it first. I can do it when it's my turn, And Tara she's amazing, being so brave and having such courage at that young age. Wow.
So true. And I think, we prayed for a miracle too, but we don't get to control God and say what that miracle is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Of course we prayed for healing, we did. But actually the healing was on a spiritual level. It wasn't on a physical level. And we have to be free to say, God, yes, we want a miracle, we want a healing, but we don't get to define what that is, And there were so many miracles along the way, and so many blessings, and none of those prayers were wasted. No. One of my friends at the time, she was a pastor, and her faith was rocked so much by the fact that Tara got sick.
Wow.
And she was like, but it's not fair. It's not, you guys love Jesus and, you have faith. And I was like, yeah, but, that doesn't mean that we don't suffer. Yeah. And in fact, I don't know, maybe it's the Irish Catholic in me. We kind of expect suffering, I don't feel gypped by it because we don't, suffering is it's a part of the normal human condition. Yeah. People have always suffered because there is death in the world and there is sickness in the world. Yeah.
But we don't suffer in terms of when we're saved and we are a new creation in Christ, there's no suffering in heaven.
Yeah.
Tara is not suffering. My dad is not suffering. And that is our freedom from suffering.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not necessarily in this life. We get the fruit of the Spirit, absolutely, like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, all of those good things, and so many blessings from God. But I don't follow Jesus because I want his blessings. I follow Jesus because he's the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah.
And I know that one day he will wipe away every tear, and there will be sorrow no more, and there will be no more sickness. And that is either when Jesus comes back or when I'm present with the Lord. So
Yeah, 100%.
yeah,
Yeah, totally agree.
absolutely. Man, I feel like we could just keep talking about Tara. But I think I'll just say one last thing on Tara before we move on, is looking back on that time, is there one particular thing that stands out to you the most?
I think, so yeah, there's an image that sticks out for me. And my sister took the photo, but unfortunately it disappeared with her phone. But she took this photo of me just doing normal mum things, caring for Tara when she was sick. And coming through the window was some light, just the sun was shining. And that's just an image that I'll always hold, that it was such a privilege to care for Tara. And through being her mum and caring for her from the moment she was conceived until her last natural breath, that is my greatest privilege. And that I grew so much as a person in my faith and as a mum. And that Tara was just so brave. And even though I cry a lot, her strength will always inspire me through any suffering.
Wow.
Yeah, just being a mum, Tara said to me that I just had to keep being a great mum to go to heaven. And, to me, that's me following Jesus, because that's my biggest calling, is to be a mum, whatever comes along within that. Yeah.
And you're a great mum. You really are.
Thanks.
I think that's a beautiful picture of just like you held her in your womb, in your tummy, when she was little inside of you, and then when she passed, you and Eden in the bed with her, holding her, it just seems so special.
Yeah.
So special.
So special. And she didn't know that one of my biggest worries when she was sick was that she would die alone. And it was something that I prayed about a lot. Because, as a mum, the thought of your child being alone at that last moment. But just out of the blue, one day Tara said to me, "No one dies alone, Mum, because God's always there." And then she just carried on.
Yeah.
I'd never said to her. But I'm so thankful to God that I was with her.
Yeah. Another gift. Another gem.
Such a gift.
Yeah.
Such a gift. Because there were lots of times when she was, sleeping in her own bed or,
or in school even. Just
anything.
No one knows when they're going to die. We could be hit by a bus or whatever. None of us knows. But what a gift that was.
That was such a gift.
Yeah, we were with my dad as well when he passed, and that was incredible.
Yeah.
Just being able to hold them one last time as well, give them a hug, and now we're going to talk. I mean, I almost just want to keep talking about Tara, but there is something else we wanted to talk about on this episode, which is you're the president of a local Voice for Life.
Sure am.
Voice for Life, for those who don't know, is a nationwide pro-life organisation, and you're the president of the local branch here.
Yeah.
How did you come to be pro-life? If you're enjoying this episode of the podcast, please make sure you like and subscribe.
Well, I've always been pro-life, but I didn't kind of label it that. My mum was really involved in pro-life movements when we were kids down in Christchurch. We went to some marches and protest things like that. But the sanctity of human life is talked about a lot within the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church is really vocal about being anti-abortion and anti-euthanasia. So, yeah, it's part of our Catholic tradition, but it's also something that was talked about a lot in my family. Yeah, and I've always known that a human is a human from the moment of conception.
Yeah.
And to me, a human is a human from then all the way to their last breath. And it's not anybody's right to decide that shouldn't exist, that person shouldn't exist. And the label for that is pro-life.
So what do you think it means to be pro-life, in your own words?
I think it means to stand up for human life no matter what stage that human life is, and particularly to be the voice for those who have no voice. So the baby in the womb, or the elderly who's sick, or people with disabilities who can't advocate. It's pro-life for life.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up, the elderly as well, because it's almost not becoming anymore pro-life is, anti-abortion, like you said. Pro-life is pro-life almost to the point where we're anti-suicide, because that is now a huge thing. Like, I think one of the local news, I don't know if it was New Zealand Herald or Stuff or something like that, they were promoting someone killed themselves, but they're celebrating it because it was euthanasia. And it's like, how is that?
Yeah, just
how
a
is that
different
not
name.
Suicide?
Yeah.
And now we're sort of accepting suicide as a nation, which is absolutely tragic. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a real reflection of the culture of death, and I think the start of that was the legalisation of abortion, because if this is okay over here, then that becomes okay, and then that becomes okay, and that becomes okay. And as soon as you say that one section of humanity is disposable, why can't other parts of society be disposable? So that's why we say every life is value.
Yeah. And like you mentioned about no matter disability as well. Some people may not know, but I can't remember what country it is in Europe that have eliminated Down syndrome.
Yeah, so Iceland has virtually eliminated Down syndrome.
They haven't found a cure. No.
They just abort pretty much every single child
that has Down syndrome. Yeah. And what a tragedy that is.
Yeah, and our Tara could have been euthanized if she lived in Belgium.
Wow.
As a child with an illness.
Wow.
And now in the Netherlands and Belgium and other countries, you can be euthanized for mental health reasons. So it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
How do you feel about that? Like, having gone through the passing of Tara, and people will say, oh, it's mercy to, euthanize a child or an adult or someone who's going through a terminal illness. What would you say to that, reflecting on Tara?
One of the things that people say is, I want to die with dignity. But I think as Christians, we know our dignity comes because we're made in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah.
And I think it's another reflection of the separation of culture from Christianity, is that it used to just be a belief that everybody had dignity because they were a person.
Because they're a person.
And so what does that mean, to die with that dignity? You don't cease to be a person because you're dying.
Yeah.
And, caring for somebody who is dying used to be an honoured part of society. Yeah. But now I think people are genuinely fearful of what that means. And people are fearful of death itself.
Wow. And that's tricky too, because like you say, our culture is so removed from Christian roots that our culture had. New Zealand definitely had Christian roots. So we don't fear death, as a believer. I have no fear of death. But I can understand, I suppose, why the world does. But that doesn't mean that then it's okay. Because we're scared of death, now we're going to say, okay, I'm going to control death. Yeah. And that's almost like what it is.
Yeah, and they want to have control over every aspect because they're fearful of what what it's going to be, and that loss of control. But I also think it's a loss of community. Like it used to be that communities took care of mothers and newborn babies and families with toddlers. There was support, and for the elderly there was support. But I think people feel a burden. Whereas it didn't use people sick. It's a privilege. People who were sick, people who were sick, they didn't frame themselves up as a burden. They just saw it as a natural cycle of what happens in a community. I took care of, great Nana so-and-so when they were sick. Yeah.
Therefore, I know that I will be taken care of. And there was a cycle of, caring for and being cared for. And I think we have lost that.
Yeah. And when you're a child, when you're an infant, and when you're a baby, you rely so much on your parents. And for me, like being there when my dad passed, I was like, this is a way that I can kind of carry him. He was there for me and he cared for me when I couldn't help myself or do anything for myself. And what a privilege it is to return that favor in a way, even though it is hard and it is sad and it is a little bit like of an unknown. It's a privilege, really.
It is a privilege.
I found it a privilege.
Yeah, and we have to, there is a relinquishing of control and giving ourselves in true service to care for a person who is dying.
Selflessness.
Yeah, but I think people try and reframe. There's a lot of wordplay around things, but the fundamental fact is thou shalt not kill. Yeah. But people go, in the
but
cases
they want
of,
it. Yeah, or...
they're sick, they're going to die anyway. But there is a consequence to... When we play God, there's a consequence to that. Yeah. And I think we are living in a society where we are living the consequences of decisions that have been made for 50 years in New Zealand, where abortion has just gone swept through and been so huge that there is a culture change in New Zealand where people just are okay with it. They go, abortion's okay in cases of rape, or abortion's okay if the mother's health or the baby's sick, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it becomes, they're poor, they don't have the skills, it's the wrong time, I want to buy a house first, and it just, the list of reasons, where is the line drawn?
Yeah. And of course, like, no one, we had a big chat with Kate Cormack ages ago, like in the podcast. So if you do want to look at that, go search up Kate Cormack in the Outside of Sunday podcast episodes. But we talked about, rape. I mean, if we're going to say it's okay for rape, even if we said it was okay for rape, that's like 0.1% of all abortions. It's massively tiny, but people won't say, okay, we'll just do it for cases of rape, or, it is a small percentage, and it's a tragedy if anyone ever gets raped. Of course it is. But then we're just allowing everyone for any reason to take a life.
Exactly. But it's still, that is still a life.
Yeah.
It's still, no matter the circumstances of how that baby got there, it is still a life.
Yes. And it's just like, I'm a person. I'm as much of a person because I was conceived in consent as if I was conceived in rape. That doesn't change my personhood or my value. We're not the crime, they're people.
Yeah. And the same as if you're born in poverty.
Yeah.
You are still a person. We should be putting our energy and resources into creating a better society.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think exactly what you said. And I think it's almost like a sympathy thing. Let's let these women have an abortion because they're in poverty, or because they're maybe have background in drugs or whatever, or they have an addiction. So it's better for the baby if we just kill them so they're not born into that environment. What do you say to that?
But what does that say to all those people who are living in poverty now? What does that say to a child who's living in poverty, or an adult that's living in poverty?
Today.
Yeah. You might as well not be here because your life is pretty terrible. It's... The whole messaging is so flawed because we have a responsibility in society to take care of all people. And I think it's an absolute cop-out. It's really, really cost-effective to abort babies.
in New Zealand. It's really, really cost effective. It costs about $2,000 to abort a baby. And then you don't have to provide healthcare, you don't have to provide education, you don't have to provide support. So I think, on a really crass fundamental level, it suits the government incredibly well to abort babies in poor families.
Wow.
And I think that is a really horrible way to look at it.
Yeah.
But I've had this conversation a few times with people where I've gone, I wonder how many women, if you said, you can have an abortion at a cost of $2,500, that the government's going to pay, or we'll give you the $2,500 as a step up.
To help you.
I wonder how many women would choose option B. One of the simple things that we do is stand at the hospital a couple of times a week on days that abortions happen with signs that say, you're a mama, choose life, or choose love, or choose your baby, or toot if you love babies, all positive signs. And we know that 75 women last year turned around from having their abortion. Whether we had a part in it or not, we don't know. We know for 100% sure that one woman this year turned around because she saw our signs and chose life. If that was all it took for a woman to change their mind,
one little sign
where someone said, you can do this, your baby has value, if that is all it took. There is so much potential to change society, and there are so many vulnerable women who the only messaging that they can hear is, you can't do this, you can't afford it, you don't have the skills, you're poor, you're uneducated, instead of going, yes you can. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. Plenty of poor women have successfully parented their child because they love their child. You can love your child. And then offering that, this is how we can support you.
An interesting one, I think, that is becoming extremely common is, I can't do it because I have mental health problems. I will be depressed. I can't handle having another baby. What would you say to someone who's kind of in that position?
I think, again, it comes back to a big part of it is support and community. And if we can, imagine if everybody who said that they were pro-life actually extended a pro-life hand and said, well, how can I help? Can I cook you a meal? Can I bring you meals? Can I hold the baby?
I think a lot do.
Yeah. Can I help with your toddlers? And there are a lot doing that. But imagine if we had a culture of society where everybody did do that. And I think, the government on one hand says, we help you with mental health, but, you're not going to cope because of this. It's like there is always a way through. There is always a way through. And there's always adoption as well. And
I think this tragedy that has happened recently, I don't know when it started, but somehow it turned from abortion is no longer shameful, adoption is a shameful thing. Like, it's a shameful thing to adopt out your baby if you're going to struggle with mental health problems, but it's okay to have an abortion. How did we get to that place? Coming up next week on the Outside of Sunday podcast.
I've had an ongoing thing with our hospital about trying to get facts. They're so vague and evasive around the stats around abortion. And my question to them is, if there's no moral issue with it, why are you so secretive about it? She was told by every doctor to abort her baby. And she was like, no, I won't, no, I won't, no, I won't. Through rape, terminal baby.
Wow.
And one of the obstetricians said to her, you are the only teenager that we have seen this week who has decided to keep their baby, and you are the only one with a child with a disability.
Congrats! You made it to the end of this episode of the Outside of Sunday podcast. Thanks for the support. Become an official outsider by liking and subscribing and leaving a 5-star review. If you'd like to help our podcast grow, maybe consider becoming a member of our Patreon community. Membership starts at just $3 a month. Not only will you be helping us encourage more New Zealand Christians to live their faith outside of Sunday, but as a member, you'll receive access to full episodes right away. No more waiting for next week. Just click support the show in the show notes. As always, if you'd like to connect with the podcast, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search Outside of Sunday podcast. And don't forget to let someone you know about this podcast.